Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another New Jersey Constitutional Republicans virtual conversation. It's great to have my great friend and brother, Saleem Trice, on with me again today. Brother Saleem.
Hey, man, how you doing, JR? How's it going?
Well, now that you're here and we're going to have a great discussion, doing great. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your outstanding podcast that people need to listen to.
Okay, my name is Saleem Trice from Jersey City, New Jersey. For those who don't know me, I conduct a podcast about every 2 weeks on various issues, various topics. Predominantly try to stick with inner city issues, challenges that plague the inner city communities, such as poverty, economics, finance, education, international trade. I mean, we kind of get into the whole gamut of everything and fit that into the overall problem that inner city communities face.
That's great. And we've had two previous shows that we've discussed several topics, generally related around the topic of justice, Saleem. Today, we're basically going to build the foundation. We're going to start from the very beginning and talk about what is justice. So in your view, what would be the definition of justice? What is justice? That's the question.
Okay. So in my view, in my estimation, justice would be that which is equitable, that which is fair, based upon the differences that people possess. That would be, in simplification, that would be my understanding and my estimation of justice. However, I'm not in denial that when we're talking about justice in relation to politics, then sometimes it may carry with it a different context or a different type of association. I think one of the issues that inner city communities have when we're looking at the issue of justice is that we don't necessarily identify with the current operation of justice because it's not something that many of us would assume to have been exposed to. In other words, if I haven't been exposed to justice, I can't give you a definitive definition on what it is. And this is how many of us think. This is predominantly the psychology that goes on in inner city communities, is that I can't give you something that I have never been exposed to. And I think that we have to fix that. But, parlaying back to my original premise, that would be my understanding and my estimation of justice.
Well, that's a great big start to the show. And I just want to, if I could, Saleem, share with you. I'll start with the etymology of the word, the meaning of the word. Etymology Online gives the definition, which I think, and I've looked up several definitions of the word justice, mid-12th century word of Latin derivation, and quote, the exercise of authority in vindication of right by assigning reward or punishment, unquote. Again, the exercise of authority in vindication of right by assigning reward or punishment. Also, quality of being fair and just, moral soundness, and conformity to truth. From the old French justice, legal rights, jurisdictions, all derivatives. From the 11th century, from Latin justia, quote, righteousness, equity, from justus, upright or just. And the meaning, the right order, equity, and rewarding to every one of which is his due. In English is from the late 14th century. The old French word has widespread senses, including uprightness, equity, vindication of right, court of justice, judge. In English, 1400 to 1700, sometimes also with a vindicative sense, infliction of punishment, legal vengeance, also an attribute of the word, as a title for a judicial officer. 12th century, 1200s, during the 1200s, 13th century, justice of the peace is a test from the early 14th century word, to do justice to someone or something, deal with as is right or fitting, is from the 1670s. And in the Mercy and Hymns, Latin Justia by Glost, by Old English Redesui. So here is a very technical definition of the word. And what I thought was very interesting in this definition, Saleem, was the fact that they include a quote from the Federalist Papers, number 51, that says, "Justice is the end of government. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained, or until liberty be lost in the pursuit." And I thought that was a very fitting quote. And what are your thoughts on that definition and how we apply that now to certain specific categories and understandings and policies? What do you think of that definition, Brother Saleem?
I think that's a good starting point for the concept of justice. I think that's a good starting point to work from. However, when we're talking about etymology, then we understand that that is definitely the structure and treatment of words. And sometimes those words are the nature of the treatment of it. At times is diffused based on the culture that's picking it up. In other words, cultural linguistics plays a large part in how etymology can change from generation to generation and culture to culture. But with that being said, I absolutely agree with that definition. I think that's a good starting point. One thing that I did see in there, and this is one of the things that struck me about it, was the issue of punishment or the issue of rights. I think that's extremely instrumental when you're dealing with the issue or the concept of justice. Because if you have those who feel that their rights are being stripped away, then they feel that justice is not being awarded. If you have those that feel like punishment is the main issue or the theme of the issue, but it's not a part of the issue, then they may also feel that justice is not necessarily being awarded. I mean, just because something is being punished doesn't necessarily mean that justice is being awarded. I think with the issue of punishment comes the issue of balance, and I also think you have to be proportionate with respect to what you're punishing and the crime that you're punishing as well. What say you?
Well, that's an excellent observation that you make. And of course, we see there with that definition that it's just not retributive justice. There's distributive justice and this is why government is created. In the Federalist paper, Federalist 51 says that the end of government is to do justice. So that's where we, people like you and me and the citizens, have to hold our government accountable to promoting and practicing justice. And of course, we hear the word used in so many different ways now. So that's why I think it's important that we get a grasp on the definition of the word justice. And I did a word study in the Bible to see how many times the word justice is used or translated from the original, in this case, the Hebrew. It's 28 times the word is translated in the Hebrew of the Old Testament. And it's not found in the New Testament at all. Not once is the word justice, but the word generally has to do with God associating justice with making the right decision, righteousness. The word is actually translated, the same Hebrew word is translated righteousness over 120 times and 28 times as justice. So justice and righteousness in God's view are similar. They are one and the same. So that's another thing that we can bring into our thinking when it comes to the word justice is the word righteousness. What are your thoughts on that?
I think righteousness determines the functionality of justice. If you're not righteous, then you're not even going to administer justice. How could you? Right? If you're not righteous, you don't really see any. If I'm a criminal and you're a criminal, there's no benefit in me instituting any sort of justice. So, I mean, righteousness determines the functionality of justice. If you have tyrannical leaders or tyrannical rulers occupying the bench or occupying the office, then you already know that you're not going to be receiving any sort of real justice at all. It'd be mediocre at best, which kind of brings me to the one of the themes that I wanted to talk about in relation to the subject matter of, criminal justice.
Good.
So, like, let's take the issue of criminal justice for an example. I think that's also a good starting point to look at or to evaluate, to contextualize the issue of justice.
No doubt.
The bottom line is, some of our policies, criminal justice policies, that is, they create criminals. Right? I think when we're looking at crime, we have to look at two things. We have to look at the consequence, which in this case is an aspect of justice because it deals with the actual punishment of the crime. And then we have to look at the context in terms of under what guise does the crime operate under, whether it's poverty, whether it's greed, whatever it is, what context does it operate under? Now, we as a government, we're responsible for both. We're responsible to administer the consequence, and we're responsible to cultivate the policy that would generate the best results, or in this case, would generate the issue of righteousness, as what we was talking about. But the bottom line is, we don't, a lot of times that's not the case. And when that's not the case, the downfall is that you institute a policy that nurtures criminality and you give little to no punishment to it, which precipitates the continuation of crime. And therefore, in that case, justice remains absent from the larger context of the issue. So I'm saying that to say, justice, you parlay that into the various of issues, into the various of challenges that the nation face. You look at situations like criminal justice, you look at situations like poverty, you look at situations like war, you look at situations like whatever you may want to look at. And you kind of see, well, what context does this policy create? And what punishment, if any, does it get for wrongful acts? And I think that right there is kind of like a good assessment or a good measurement that can help you appreciate the concept of justice even more.
Absolutely. Well said. Let me bring up another. I just wanted to show the people, Saleem, too, where we get this word. The word in the Hebrew, tzachal, is the Hebrew word. And here it is, that's translated in this Bible 128 times as righteousness, and justice only 15 times. Translated right, righteous acts 3 times, moderately 1 time, and righteously. So there is the actual Hebrew word. And I did want to share with the people, I did have one more. I'm not going to be able to bring that slide up, but I do want to just show another quote that actually comes from Alexander Hamilton, which I believe is very relevant to our discussion. And he says, quote, "Why has government been instituted at all? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint." What are your thoughts on that quote, Saleem?
that quote to me addresses the natural disposition of man. I think the natural disposition of man is to not follow the dictates. That's just, you know, that's just the natural disposition of people.
Human nature.
That goes all the way back to our father. So I mean, like, you know, that's just the natural disposition. That's what it is. The issue is that when we're looking at the issue of justice, or we're talking about it from a biblical understanding, that often gets lost with the nuances of situations, or we're talking about a continuum of something that changes based on the nature of time. Like, what is, you know, the thing is, human behavior never changes, right? It is what it is.
That's right.
But
yes,
the thing is, people, culture, laws, things like that, in terms of as it relates to man, those, we change those things. So what I'm saying is that the biblical understanding of justice, our religious understanding of justice, whatever political or religious persuasion that you may operate under, the bottom line is those things often gets lost when we're talking about the nuances of situations. And the excuse of it is that those traditional concepts on how we understand justice and how we apply it doesn't necessarily keep pace with the change of times. And if it don't necessarily keep pace with the change of times, then when we institute them, it's not justice at all. It's nothing more than a form of oppression. This is not my understanding, but this is this is how I'm just playing devil's advocate in this type of situation. And I'm saying that this is how others view it. This is how they see it.
Yes, and excellent observation, Saleem. So now the question is there a fixed understanding, a perpetual understanding of justice? We have the perpetual understanding. We understand that human nature does not change. Now, I think that those who want to change the definition of justice and who have changed the definition of justice do not believe in the perpetuity of the human nature of mankind. They believe that it can be somehow engineered. And this is what we've seen over the last century or more in American education, teaching people what to think as opposed to allowing them and cultivating them to think for themselves, exercising critical thinking, thinking that the person is born with a blank slate and that slate can be filled with whatever you want to put into it, or whoever is educating or mentoring that person put into it. Or the other view that we're talking about now that you and I both agree on is the human nature of people. So the question then becomes, Saleem, what should the definition of justice be changing, or should it be as fixed as the understanding that we have with human nature?
No, the understanding of justice should never change. I mean,
That's
you can't. I mean, justice is justice. I mean, the understanding of justice doesn't change. What changes are the conditions in which man may operate under may change, but the behavior in and of itself never changes. It is what it is. And justice is allocated to rectify behavior. So therefore it should never change. I mean, at all. I mean, to change it, to change justice or to change the nature of justice is to completely undermine the legitimacy that it affords government.
That's right, so, exactly.
There's definitely no way in the world I would agree with the fact that you would change justice. No.
Right, but we do know the way the word is used now: environmental justice, reproductive justice, social justice. I mean, it goes on and on and on. The way this word has been in many ways misapplied. The other thing that I wanted to discuss with you too, Saleem, which I think is very interesting and something that I just recently discovered in putting together materials for the civics classes that we were giving. And that is the fact that God told Adam and Eve, the first direction or commands, if you will, that God gave our parents was to be fruitful and multiply. And then he said that you will eat of all of the green herb of the earth, and you will eat of you'll basically be vegetarians. That was the next command. Then we know what happened when God instituted what we would consider negative law, and that he said that thou shalt not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, we know what happened there. That's a whole different other topic of discussion. But then we know that God destroyed the world by water, and basically started over again with 8 people of the family of Noah. As soon as the flood had dissipated and the earth was again inhabitable, God commanded Noah the same thing as he did Adam and Eve. And he said that be fruitful and multiply and replenish, fulfill, and subdue the earth. God also told Adam and Eve to have dominion over the earth. I shouldn't forget that, meaning that man is in charge of this earth. He is the steward of this earth. And that's why we need to take care of it, and we need to be responsible always. But the fact is that Noah was given the same command, but interestingly enough, those commands had nothing to do with man in relation to man. There was no command given that man will govern man in any way, shape, or form. He was talking specifically to individuals, and he didn't institute any type of a civic or civil government until after he told Noah. And I'll read it for us. He said, every moving thing which that liveth shall be meat for you. Now, no more vegetarian, now also meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things, but flesh with the life thereof, which is of the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require, at the hand of man. At the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. And then we read in Genesis 9:6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. So this is the first civic commandment. God is establishing this civic institution right here of capital punishment, saying that it is the responsibility of civil government, of man, to take the life of another man if that person is a murderer. And of course, later on down the road, 2,000 years later, God gives Noah, or more, maybe 2,500 years later, God gives Moses, rather, the law and specific laws that would be used in a court amongst judging. Moses is the original judge in that respect. But this was the first institution, the first time that God instituted the responsibility of man in governing his fellow man, and it had to do with murder. And in God's what God is doing here, he's associating justice with capital punishment. And the reason that this is so important is because that individual who was murdered was done so unjustly, because that person also is created in the very image of God, as we all are. What are your thoughts?
Here's my retort. Is when you say he's associating justice with capital punishment, theoretically, I would agree. I think where I would push back is I wouldn't necessarily say that in its totality. What I would say is that he was associating that form of justice to that specific type of crime, right? That was a specific crime dealing with murder. And that specific crime of murder, the punishment that comes from the punishment that came from that is supposed to be, as well, a life is also supposed to be taken, because a life was taken unjustly. So I think when it came to the capital punishment, it was being associated with that specific crime. And because of that, it met that specific form of justice. But I think there's a larger issue at play, right? And that issue is the elimination of capital punishment from the books, right? We have a lot of states that have completely did away with capital punishment. There's no capital punishment at all. And that kind of goes back to what I originally said. When you're looking at crime, there's two things that you want to look at: the consequence and the context. Crime is a function of consequence and context. If you don't issue out the appropriate justice based on the level of crime or the level of propensity to commit crime, then you do nothing but reciprocate, right? And that in and of itself is a form of injustice, right? I mean, it's not just, injustice is it's a form of oppression as well. So I mean, like, if you're not going to issue justice, then then it's injustice. It's either one or all. It's not. Neither they can't exist they can't exist in the same context. You're either issuing one, or by virtue of you not issuing one, by default, you are issuing the other. There's literally no way in the world that you can get around. So I think that's really the large issue at play, is the fact that a lot of states have eliminated capital punishment from the books. And this is this brings into the question of the level of criminality that they are indirectly catering to or creating by virtue of eliminating capital punishment. I'm for capital punishment. I think if you take a life unjustly, that in return your life should be taken as well. But you know what, JR? This happened because they completely separated church from state, right? The legal system no longer operates with a theological perspective. They have completely did away. They literally gutted it out. So it doesn't operate with that no more. And the reason why is because, like I said before, it can't. Religion, or the religious institution, is a powerful institution. So is government. Mm-hmm. Those two things can't exist within the same context, man, because religion sets laws, it sets constraints, it sets pros and cons and orders and this and that. Government can't acquiesce to that because they themselves are considered an institution of power. No institution of power is going to relinquish their power to a higher institution. It's just not going to happen. So the clever thing to do was to completely separate church from state. When you separate the theology from everything, you no longer have to apply the theology to everything. And there you have chaos.
Excellent point. And the other thing that we can think about too, Saleem, is the fact that we talk about law, and we've discussed this before, and this is something I want to get into you with in the future with other programs with you. Law begins with God. God's word, his very first words to Adam. Actually, when he said, "Let there be light," he instituted all of the laws that are associated with light. And then in the creation of the world and everything that had to do with that. But when he said that thou shalt not eat of the tree of good, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, that's a very exotic word, very exotic idea. But it was merely a testing program. And it was a tableau, if you will, to see and to show and to identify that man internally or incarnately and intrinsically it rejects the word of God, which is what God said when he said that, you can't, you stay away from that tree or you'll die. Now, of course, we know they lived many, many years later, but they died spiritually. But the point I'm trying to make is that the law of God comes first before civil law. Now, if man wants to make a law that's contradictory to the law of God, it is null and void. So we associate that with the elimination of capital punishment. God never abrogated that command. When Jesus said that you've heard in old time that an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth, well, he is describing justice right there, an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. That doesn't literally mean if I take your eye out, you're going to gouge mine out. What that means is that justice for justice, life for life. And that's what we see here in Genesis 9:6. And it's very, very important to God because all individuals, and this gives the great sovereignty and the sacrosanctness of human life, if you will. Every human being is important, regardless of their station, regardless of their physical attributes, regardless of what they say or where they're from or their skin color or anything. All people are created equal in the image of God. And this is what the Declaration said in the self-evident truth, that all men are indeed created equal, or all human beings, and God is putting the stamp on that. He's identifying that with this law of capital punishment. Now, just let me finish by saying that the government comes into play, and there are many people who don't believe in the word of God. They don't believe in the law as being the law of God being the foundation of all law. And they say, well, we know better than that. We know that these criminals, it may not be their fault that they committed this crime. It may be because they have a bad economic environment, or their father abused them, or something is caused them. Of course, we know that it's within the nature of all of us. Interestingly enough, Cain killed his brother, the very first murder, the brother killing the brother right from the start. But yet God didn't require his life, because the commandment was not given of whoso sheddeth man's blood, so shall by man his blood be shed. Cain had to answer directly to God for that. Anyone after this command to Noah had to answer to a civil institution made up of other human beings. This is why this is the first instance of civil government, of man governing his fellow man through government. But the people who say capital punishment is, it's archaic, it's an old-fashioned idea, they are denying the justice of God in this respect as life for life. Why? Because the person's created in the image of God. And those who say we don't need capital punishment, we know better, they're shaking their fist up to God saying, we know better than you. No different than those who were building the Tower of Babel. No different. And this is what needs to be. We need to think about this again and reevaluate and readdress this situation concerning capital punishment, because that is justice according to God.
That is justice. I think the religion or the religious landscape, I think it would go a long way if they collectively organized and pushed for the reinstituting of theology back into education. I mean, why not? You instituting everything else up in there. I mean, think about
That's a good
it.
point.
I mean, like, because the pushback would technically be, well, you know, we want to separate that from that, but you don't want to separate that from nothing else. Like, you're pushing everything else up in there. Everything else is up in there now. I mean, everything else, everything in that curriculum up in there now. I mean, you're gonna open up the book. You reading everything on everything, right? So, I mean, if that's the case, I mean, you might as well just reinstitute that back up into the curriculum. And this way we can say, okay, you know, you're giving a balanced approach, and then let them make up their mind with that. But they would never see the thing. They would never do that though. Like that's just I think we're too far gone from that. I think most of us, now I don't mean individually, because I believe I believe you can, you know, because if that was the case, and I would just say, you know, give up preaching about the word of God if you feel like,
Good point.
we're completely doomed, right? But what I'm saying is individually, I think we're good. I mean, individually, I think you can educate other individuals. You'll be able to change other people individually. What I'm talking about too far gone is the collective of society and the trajectory that society is going towards. With that respect, I think we're just completely, I think we're completely too far gone from what we're discussing here today. I think most of us is just completely too far gone, because to reinstitute God back into education, it would suppress many things. It would pose a direct threat to many things. Profitability is one. So I'm with you. I think it's worth a shot. I mean, every other group is organizing collectively and they're pushing for policies to be funneled inside certain organizations. I don't know why religious organizations is not doing the same. I think they should be doing the same. I mean, give these politicians and give this political institution a run for their money. I mean, that's what I think we should be doing. But collective as a society, I don't know. I just think we're too far gone from that.
Well, that's why you and I have these conversations, Saleem, because what we believe individually, we want to bring out to society to maybe bring back these ideas. And one thing that we have to remember is that when people go to law school and they become lawyers, they're basically shown that the law is separate from God and the Bible, and that cannot be done. That is impossible. God is the ultimate legislator. He is legislating the blood flowing through our veins right now and everything that's occurring to keep us alive. He is legislating the entire universe, working accordingly as it does, so that life can be sustained and continues on, and the repetition of the sun coming up and going down, that is all legislated. That's all law. That's what the laws of nature and nature's God, as the founders, as Thomas Jefferson wrote in the preliminary remarks of the Declaration of Independence. And it's because we as human beings, we retract from that. We don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to be told we're going to die if we do something that's not good for us. And that gets back to that unchanging human nature that we have. But the problem is that we have to bring law. We have to teach people that law, this can be done in the house. It starts with you and your wife teaching your lovely daughter what is right from wrong. The parents are the chief educators. You will educate your child as long as you live. And that's what has to be brought back into everyday family life, is the education. The most important education that the child will receive will not come from the school. It will come from their parents. And that's why it's so important that they have two parents.
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think that's also a major problem that challenges the society as a whole, is the division and the breakup of family.
That's
it. But here's the deal: when you back to the law argument, is that you have law and you have justice. Now we know God's law guarantees justice. It's designed to guarantee justice. Man's law does not. So when we're looking at man's law, we're not necessarily looking at it in the context of whether or not it can award justice, because we know essentially it cannot. Anytime you take God's legislation out of the picture, you can never award justice at all. So I mean, the law as it operates now is not necessarily designed to award any type of justice. I mean, if it does, it just does. But that's not the purpose of it at all. I mean, it's just no way. You can't take God. You can't take theology out of the picture where law actually came from, and say we're going to take it out the picture, but we're still going to award justice after we take it out the picture. It's impossible.
Right.
And it never
And
happens.
also,
And I think what happens is that a lot of us, we become victims of the moment. In other words, you have courts that evaluate cases, and they judge based on those cases, or based on the merit of those cases, or based on the merit of those facts. And we as people, we become victim of the moment. We feel that justice was awarded in that moment, in that situation. But what typically happens is, as time progresses and as years go past, you see the real or the true outcome of that ruling. It completely falls apart and it's completely chaos. Justice is not necessarily looked at short term. Justice is a sustainable phenomenon. So it's not necessarily that you become a victim of the moment in terms of what you've seen at that particular instant. It's whether or not that ruling is sustainable throughout the course of time. And of course, it's not when it's coming from people. It only remains like that when you're dealing with God himself. So that's that once again, that has to be reinstituted.
And it's interesting too to remember, Saleem, that throughout history we've had men like Augustine, like Martin Luther, and like Martin Luther King being jailed in a Birmingham jail for peaceably protesting against unjust Jim Crow laws. He said, and he reiterated what Aquinas and many other great theologians said, that any law that is contradictory to God's law is no law at all. And he used that as an argument, Martin Luther King, as an argument against the injustice of this unreasonable idea of separate but equal, which constituted these Jim Crow laws that treated Black Americans differently than white Americans, which is injustice. It is not righteousness. It's not based upon God's law, because we know that God's law says that all men are created equal. And what that means, as we've seen, is that all men are created in the image of God, meaning in the likeness of God himself. That's what brings us all together as one. So remember the fact that, and this is what people need to do, Saleem, is to ask themselves, is this law just? Does this law conform to the word of God, which is the law of God? The word of God and the law of God are synonymous with one another. When God speaks, it is law. And that's exactly what we read today concerning the capital punishment issue. I did want to read for you, Saleem, something that before we conclude, I wanted to read to you from a speech that Abraham Lincoln had given on June the 26th of 1857. And I believe that this speech is indicative of true justice, of real justice that we've been talking about today. And he said they, meaning the founders, meant to set up a standard maxim for a free society. That was the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which should be familiar to all and revered by all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence and augmenting the happiness and value of life to all people of all colors everywhere. That assertion that all men are created equal was of no practical use in effecting our separation from Great Britain, and it was placed in the Declaration not for that, but for future use. Its authors meant it to be, thank God, it is now proving itself a stumbling block to those who at aftertimes might seek to turn a free people back into the hateful paths of despotism, which is exactly what the slave power wanted to do by not only maintaining slavery, but expanding slavery into the territories. But in there, we see that the founders and Abraham Lincoln brought this out beautifully. is the fact that the ascertainment, the constant trying to attain, we're constantly, Saleem, trying to bring justice. We're trying to fulfill justice. We're trying to fulfill the founders' ideals on equality, on natural rights, on the laws of nature and nature's God. And yet we maybe never will attain to it, but yet we strive to do it. That's why you and I have these conversations to share with the public. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you start from the home, then you start from your family, then you start from your closest friends, and then you branch off from there. I think it all starts home. It all starts with the family. It all starts with your closest friends, and then you branch off from there. You don't worry about obtaining the collective. You worry about obtaining the individual first. I think the collective will come, but you worry about but you worry about the individual first. That's where I would start at right there. It's good to have these discussions with you.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's good to have these discussions with you. These, believe it or not, I don't have these discussions quite often. I mean, I have them periodically. You know what I mean? I don't.
You're the only one who'll talk about it with me.
I'm the only one that'll talk about it with you.
Well, I try to, I'm friends with politicians and representatives, and when they see me coming, they say, "Oh my God, here comes the preacher of the Republican gospel." They don't want to. They don't. You and I. But you see, this is the thing. We're delving into a very, very deep topic that is woefully misrepresented and not understood, and that's why it's so important that we have this discussion. And what I just read is, we're looking back to the Declaration. People will write off the Declaration, the Constitution. Many people will write it off because they say, well, it was for those men were all racist. They were all, they're all old powdered wig wearers and all whatever kind of demeaning. But they understood that and it took Lincoln and it took the Republican Party to actually fulfill the words that we read about equality and the self-evident truth that we're of the equality of all mankind, that we're all created in God's image, as we read in the Bible today. And you and I have talked about the 1865 project because it all got thwarted. And the reason we still have the division and the injustice that we have today is largely because of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, who picked, unfortunately, the worst mistake he ever made was picking Andrew Jackson for his vice president, because Andrew Jackson shot down a equal rights legislation of 1865 that was better than the one that was passed 100 years later in 1965. So you and I share this burden. I share this burden to talk to my Black American brothers and sisters, to try to teach them about the Republican Party, teach them that the words have been fulfilled, that we eliminated slavery, we gave due process and equal protection to everybody, and given the right to vote. But it stopped there. And it would stop there because of the failures of Reconstruction. That's why we talk about this 1865 project. And we want to bring that back. We want to bring people back into understanding that the Republican Party is the party of emancipation. It's the party of equality. It's the party of, as Lincoln said, happiness and value given to all people of all colors everywhere. That is a Republican. And that's why we are so determined. And conversations with you, like we have together, hopefully will have people think differently and learn things they may not have known.
I think you gotta start by first separating yourself from today's establishment Republicans. You know, and I know that we're not like them. We don't identify. We don't. I mean, we don't identify with what they identify with. I think what happens, and that's important because people don't know the difference. People don't know the difference, and people ain't got time to, and people don't have time to check the difference. Like soon as you tell the average person in a soon as you tell the average person in a hood that you're a Republican, you automatically equate it with what they see on TV. They don't have to. They're not doing all of that. All of that trying to separate this and that and no, he's different because they're not doing that. But you have to do that. Like that. That's our job. Like you have to put yourself out there and show that there's a dichotomy between what you see on TV and what you see here, right? I mean, and because once you do that, then you're able to get their ear, you're able to get their attention. But until then, it becomes a situation where they just kind of paint you all in with one big brush. It's like, nah, you know, he's like them and they're the same. And I mean, birds in a feather flock together. And that's just what it is. So I think the responsibility is that you have to show a dichotomy. I mean, you have to show there's a difference between, like, just like you had some Republicans that came out and said, you know, with all due respect to Trump, no, I don't. I'm not a supporter. I'm not a fan, right? And they was willing to take the lumps that came with it. They didn't, you know what I mean? And I think, you know, you can say what you want to say, but at the end of the day, a lot of people they become appreciative of that moment because, you know, you see a person that's not necessarily politically fleeced by any establishment. You know, with them, they're beholden to the truth. And whatever the truth is what they're going to articulate, regardless of whatever the course may be. So, you know, our responsibility really is to show that there's a difference between what you see on TV and what we're here articulating. Politicians have, you know, even right now, you know, they're not. I don't see a lot of them incorporating religious principles in their policies or anything like that. And they can. I mean, a lot of their constituents are not religious. And they're not willing to rock the boat. So what you have is you just have a situation of go along to get along politics. Go along to get along and get in office and that's it. I mean, there's not too many people like you, JR. I mean, that's just the facts.
Well, you give a great, and this is what I love about our conversations, is that you'll give an honest analysis of really the difference between politics and principles. And the constitutional Republican movement, we're about principles. Yes. And I agree with you 100% about Trump, but that's for another show. So today we focused on the what is justice? That's the question that we asked. And I think we gave a pretty good foundation moving forward for our next broadcast, when we can start to move into certain categories of how this word has been used, whether justly or unjustly. And but I think today we provided a good foundation for that word and for future programs. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, look, man, I like having these discussions with you. I do understand and I do know that you operate with a significant degree of religious persuasion, and that's good. Hey, man, and I love it. I love it. You know, I love it. I really do. I really love it. Like I said, you know, I don't, you know, I mean, I have conversations like this, but I get it. I get real intricate with you. So I love having these discussions, and I love having them with you in particular. So, but in terms of what we provided, yes, I think that I think that if you are a person that has a religious affiliation or religious persuasion, and you have a biblical understanding of justice, then I think hopefully we provided some motivation for you to go out there and re-engage in civic activity in hopes of bringing this issue to the forefront.
Right. And then looking at justice through the view that we've presented with the etymology, the meaning of the word, the way God has used the word, and the true meaning of justice. Now we can hopefully move forward with all that. And I got to tell you, Saleem, you know, when I hear you on the Smoke and Mirrors podcast, and when your wife, your fine producer there, I get fired up. I mean, I literally get fired up when I hear you talking and giving verbatim, boom, ba boom, ba boom. I mean, you're just, you know, you're an inspiration to me. Not only in that way, but in all ways. You're a great gentleman, and you know, I consider you, we're a brother as we are. But I learn a lot from you. So, and I'm always enthusiastic about learning, and especially learning from you. And I think that many people will get benefit out of these broadcasts.
Yeah, hey, JR, man, the feeling is absolutely neutral. I learn from you a lot. I pay attention to you a lot. I listen to a lot of your podcasts. I read a lot of the articles that you send. So I pay attention to you a lot. I think what people underestimate is how articulate and fired up you can get when you're doing public speaking. Right? You know what I mean? So like when you're doing public speaking, I think you gotta understand you can get it there. You know what I mean? So I like that. I like the energy, brother. So absolutely keep bringing it. I already told you my brother from another mother. So I mean that's how you and I get it in. You know, I don't have too many older friends. So I don't know how old you are, I won't ask, but it's good
old
to
enough.
Be it's good to be in your circle though. Absolutely.
Well, it's great to be brothers with you, and for us to have these conversations. And if I imitate you a little bit when I'm talking to others or when I'm on the soapbox, you consider that as a compliment, because I think
man,
you're great.
Hey man, be my guest, man.
I think you're a great speaker.
Look, check it out. If you do that, when you start doing that, they're absolutely gonna know that you got a black friend.
that's my privilege and my honor to have that. But you and I, you know, we think in terms of our humanity. You know, we don't. It's funny that we can talk about the black and white thing, but we know that we're brothers.
We're just brothers, man.
And that we you know, we look at each other as human beings. But it is funny to talk about the white black thing, because I'm trying to imitate some of your vernacular. We're gonna kill it. You know, we're gonna all the different vernacular, which I love. I want to implement that, because I'm never too old to learn how to be hip.
Absolutely, man.
Right?
They got
you gotta keep giving me. You gotta keep expanding my vernacular.
So man, you gotta preserve that youth, man. You gotta preserve that youth, man. You got the young people got to look at you and say, that guy's gonna take us to the promised land, man.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll do it together. Moses and Aaron, we'll do it together, Saleem.
Absolutely, man.
Listen, Saleem, it's been a great conversation. We talked about you actually doing one in person sometime when you come up to visit. So we'll look forward to that. But again, I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, absolutely, JR, man. It's been good, man. We got to do this again.
We will. And let's encourage the people to like and share the video as much as they can, to as many people as they can, so that we can get this information and education out to everyone. So I'll conclude, Saleem, and I thank you very much, brother, again. I'll conclude with what Lincoln said. He said, liberty to all, the principle that clears the path for all, gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry to all. Thank you very much, Saleem. God bless. And thank you, our audience. Please share the video far and wide. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
You got it.
Take care, brother.
You too, man.